looking forward to this for a while. Welcome, Anna, to our Leaders Who Care series.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. I have also been looking forward to this.
Well, that's always makes me feel good anyway. so, well, I think people will see that you definitely deserve to be on a Leaders Who Care series, for sure. And I know we were just exchanging some funny Louis C.K. moments and stuff. Maybe they'll intersect in here somehow. I'm not quite sure, but that was that was a good start. So no, it is really great to have got to know you a little bit and share some of this knowledge and expertise and insights and fun that we'll have here. So always the best place to start. If you could introduce who you are, not the business side yet.
Okay.
When I say this, not the business side yet, it's really meant at all. And but where you're from originally, where you are now, family, what's your favorite color? I don't know.
All right.
Never told anybody ever, and you want to reveal it to the world now would be super cool. and
Um, I'm like an open book. I feel like everybody knows, anybody who knows me knows all of those things.
There's a lot of people here that don't know you, so I mean, go for it.
Okay. All right. Well, I have actually a very crazy sort of backstory that we don't have enough time for. I'm not sure that there are enough hours in the day to get through it, but I'm actually super grateful for it at the same time. So I'm Anna Blue. As you said, I was actually born on a hippie commune in Canada. So I feel like I always like to set that as the baseline, right? Canada, we bonded over that. But I always like to set that as my origin story baseline of, just what I came into. And my parents, my mom is British, my dad is American. They were in Canada, sort of living in this community. And I was accidentally never registered as an American born abroad. So I ended up being a Canadian citizen living illegally in the US. Nobody knew because that was back when it was easy to go back and forth. And so I have this sort of, I got held at immigration when I was 17, not having any idea that I had been illegal for like 16 years of my life in the country.
Wow, must be a shocking moment. I'm illegal.
Yeah, it was. And my mom is a little bit of a worrier and an overthinker. So there was like a moment of panic but it all worked out just fine. And now I actually have dual citizenship. So I'm grateful to them, right? That they didn't know better. And I grew up living all over the place. My mom was very much a little bit of a free spirit and tackled multiple types of career paths all over. And so I got to learn from that entrepreneurial spirit. So we sort of went west to east. I lived in San Francisco and Seattle and Texas and Colorado. And I went to high school in New York and then moved to DC after I graduated from high school. And I've been in the DC area ever since. And that is longer than I'm going to say out loud.
well done. That is one of the more interesting stories that no one knew, type of deal.
That's right.
But I'm glad you got the Canada in there, so that was good too.
Right. Yep. We the North. I say that all the time in my house.
Unfortunately, there's no Canadian teams left in the Stanley Cup playoffs, which is a bummer. But what are you going to do? So what? Growing up, then born in a hippie commune, basically an illegal child. What were you like as a kid, a teenager? Were you a big reader? Were you like full of imagination, writing stories? Did you organize kids together, play sports? What did you do? What were you like?
Yeah, always on the creative side, a huge reader, because this was, of course, before we could stream every piece of content all the time. And so huge reader, very active imagination. I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit of a liar. I kind of lived in my own reality. And
I'm not going to lie. I was a little bit.
I'm not going to lie, I was a liar. So I don't do it anymore. I'm reformed in that way. But yeah, it was definitely a part of my childhood of sort of taking this imagination and turning it into real life. And but also very creative. I was a dancer for a couple of decades and still now, like, dance cooking, I think should be a sport. I think people should have competitions. It is how I like live my joy in my kitchen all the time. And so very much, I wasn't hugely into sports, but I'm very athletic. So I ran track. I broke a couple of records, but that wasn't my thing. I was a dancer through and through.
Well, dancing is exercise. That's a sport.
Oh, 1,000%. It's hard. It is hard. Everything that cracks and pops in my body to this day, I can pretty much know exactly where in my dance career that came from.
I can relate playing hockey a lot. I know what happened to this finger and that one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
Do you
you just,
dance with your family in the kitchen while you're cooking,
yeah.
or you do? Cool.
Yeah, all the time. When my son was little, we would have these like dance parties, just like random impromptu dance parties, just the two of us. And now he's much older, but my youngest is 8. And I have a 12-year-old. So we will in the kitchen just put on music and I'll be cooking, we'll all be dancing. We have routines, like it's the whole thing.
Good for you. We need more creativity and imagination, and if you can
Yeah.
exercise at the same time. And I'm not a cook, but my sons and daughter-in-law are awesome cooks, and so
Nice.
being in the kitchen with them, let's say, doing stuff. So yeah, we need more of that, more dance,
Yeah.
more all that. Well, tell us about your educational journey to start with. You went into computer information systems at Strayer, then subsequently you got a master's in education at GWU, and
Yeah.
then you went into public service roles. So, what intrigued you along that path there?
So there's the biggest piece of what is missing in all of that is actually my undergrad started at George Washington University. And then I had my son, my oldest, winter break of my junior year of college. So that was sort of a big shift for me. I started out as a communications major. I don't know what people do with that degree, but when you're not a parent, right? When you don't have to think about that.
They communicate. That's what they do.
Right, they communicate, right? Something we all do. But I loved those classes, like back to that creativity. I'm a big debater. I will talk all day about things. And so that was very up my alley. And then now I have this life and I'm a single parent at 20 years old. And so I switched over to Strayer because of the flexibility in schedule, because I could graduate on time and take some time off, and I could, take classes in the evenings. So my babysitter, who at the time was a senior in high school, could go to school during the day. It was just a lot of putting kind of a new life together, figuratively and literally. And so when I went to Strayer, it was like the tech boom of the 90s. And so I shifted over. I'm not an analytical person. I can barely turn my computer on, but I needed to be able to support myself and my family. And it was just the two of us. And so I switched over to computer information systems thinking, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to figure it out. And when I graduated, I went through a temp agency and got a job in politics. So I got my degree, but then immediately went into politics and was just very fortunate to have 2 incredible mentors. So I spent the first almost decade of my career doing everything in DC you're supposed to do if you care about the political system. I worked on the Hill. I worked for a nonprofit. I worked for corporate lobbying. I worked for trade associations. I did all of it. It wasn't a passion point, but I sort of did all of that. But I was always what I call a closeted middle school social studies teacher. Like I was always passionate about education. So I decided I couldn't just stop. I have a mouth to feed and sort of derail my career. So when I went back to school, I studied educational policy at George Washington to get my master's. So I went back about 6 years into my career, so that I could marry the two. I could take this political experience that I had, but then tie it to something that I was really passionate about, which is education, specifically equity, and access in education.
Well, that's brilliant. I didn't know that, and kudos to you for taking on the commitment and responsibility of doing all that, because it's not easy to do that at all, and organize it. And I mean, that's a startup in itself, basically, when you're
Oh,
a
absolutely.
single mom doing that. So yeah, way to go. Us Canadians know to get stuff done,
That's right. Yeah, we do.
So, we founded Fifth Element on the basis that leaders and their businesses can do way better when they're
Mm.
doing good at the same time. And I think, and now it even is confirming more and more. You're definitely a leader in that thinking based on what you just said, even. But also with the focus on empowerment of girls and women. You were involved with Girl Up big time, and then Female Quotient, to name a couple. So how did that become, or why was that a passion for you? And if you can share some experiences where you were engaging with leaders who you either engaged to show them the value of it, or they got the value of it for their business and even their employees.
Yeah, I fell into this work, but it was always there. I was always kind of this little young budding activist before we were calling people activists, right? And just had a really strong sense of justice for everyone, regardless of who you came where you came from, who you are, how you choose to live your life, just this really strong sense of justice. I didn't know, because our education system doesn't actually teach you comprehensive career paths. So I didn't know you could do this for a living. Like, I didn't know that was a thing that I could do, is like do good in the world and also make money to feed my family at the same time. And so I'm very fortunate that I was able to find that crux. But I was working in education. I was in urban education. I loved where I was. I had been there for 5 years, and my best friend sent me this job description for Girl Up. And I literally jumped off my couch. It was like this visceral reaction when I read the job description. Girl Up is housed at the United Nations Foundation, works directly with the UN on certain aspects of the programming. I knew nothing about international development. I knew nothing about what was happening to girls and women in other countries. I just was like, I need to go do that. Whatever it is, I'm going to figure out, I need to do it. And thankfully created just this wonderful partnership with the executive director at the time. And we ultimately became co-executive directors and really built Girl Up. It was a kind of failing initiative in its original concept. And so we shifted and changed things and leaned into leadership development for young women so that they can become activists for equality in their communities. And it was just this really powerful thing. And what I will say is, it is there, women are by far, and girls, like women and girls are the most powerful natural resource we have as a world, right? And I strongly believe that it is also the most underutilized and untapped resource for a lot of different reasons. And so no matter where in that spectrum, we're 50% of the world's population, and yet there is not one country where women are equal. It doesn't exist, right? And so that just in and of itself is a huge thing to unpack history and cultural context and why and how we got here, and really learn how systems need to change. And it's a massive undertaking, and we need more men, honestly, to be involved in order for it to truly shift and change in the ways that it needs to. But for me, Girl Up is, it was working with teenage girls, and that amount of power. And I think the difference between young women today versus when I was young is that they know they're powerful, right? Like, I didn't have that. And now they have a whole world and access that's telling them that they're powerful. And that's just such a cool thing to be a part of and to see. And so it has carried me in everything. Even when I left sort of gender equality being my everyday job, it is still very much a part of what I do with AHLA. When I was at the Tech Coalition, it is that sort of thread through, because if we want to see change, we have to let women lead.
Yeah, no, it sounds like definitely it was different for women back then. They didn't think that. However, sounds like your mom instilled some of this in you, though, by
Oh, yeah.
she was freewheeling and getting stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah, to have I was raised by a single mom. It was me, my mom, my sister, and my aunt. And so this sort of like powerful woman who was just out there, we would live in Colorado, and she knew nothing about building homes. And suddenly she's building homes and doing interior designing. And then we moved, or that was in Texas. Sorry, so you have to get my backstory straight. Then we moved to Colorado, and she becomes a licensed drug and alcohol mediator. And so she was just sort of pulled by all of these different ways of helping people and of transforming communities. And that is, yes, very much in the bloodline.
Can you share even just one experience of where leaders you were dealing with, let's say at Girl Up, saw the value of being involved with you and Girl Up in the business and how it impacted their business? And I even noticed not just employees, but even going down into employees' families, because they talk about the involvement.
Yeah, we saw it all the time. We saw it certainly with businesses. I mean, we had the Girl Up was created before sort of this wave that we saw before Like a Girl, and, certainly well before Me Too and before Malala, but all of those things sort of pushed this issue forward. And suddenly a few years into Girl Up, every business, every company, every major corporation had to have like a girl strategy. They had to have a woman strategy. And the problem with being reactionary to these things is that then they'll drop you just as fast, right? So there's always that struggle of like, what is real? How much are you investing in this? But I think, so we saw it all the time when we brought the girls. Like when you bring these incredible young women and all these companies are sitting there relying on data and, focus groups and surveys and all these things to decide what this generation is. And then when you sit with them and you hear sort of what their expectations are and the world that they want to create, it's hard not to be inspired by that. Like some of my hardest days happened when I was at Girl Up, and I would walk into an event or a leadership summit and immediately just be hopeful. And when you can bring that into a business who is like, are we ready for the future of work? And these millennials are lazy and Gen Z is this, like you rely on all this nonsense. And then you bring young women to the table and all of that goes away. And it is really, really cool to watch. And I watched it with business after business after business.
Yeah, I find the same thing. It's massively energizing. And the way what I say about families too, because in the work that we do, if employees are feeling it at work, guess what? They're going home. Now, two things can happen. They can go home and say, "Oh, I'm tired. My boss sucks. Give me a beer. I'm sitting on the sofa, whatever." Or, "Hey, you guys, let's have dinner. I got to tell you what happened." And if they have daughters or even sons, but even more so daughters, and they tell them what's going on, then they feel even more so, really, that's happening. That's cool. And it makes a big impact. So, and then it goes even into the community. It's not rocket science. I think sometimes people forget that how important it is with the employees and so on. So, way to grow up, girl. Nice job.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we forget how like the power of inspiration and hope, right? And this is not a like to give any weight to political support or anything, but we had a president, Barack Obama ran on hope and change, right? Like, yes, there were policies and stuff in there, but people don't pay attention. They don't know how the government actually works. But like a man got elected who most people didn't think was electable because he inspired people. And that is, and we saw it with Donald Trump too. He ignited something and he inspired people, and businesses forget how much inspiration will matter to their business. If you can inspire your employees, it's a game changer.
Yeah, and I always love talking about belonging. Also, how it's been studied a lot, but the thing that fills people's hearts and souls more than anything they've found out by far is belonging, which is incredible, and yet not rocket science either, because you all want to belong with it, So, yeah, actually, you do know that SDG 5, which is about women, is half the reason for our name Fifth Element, by the way. Because we started with the Decade of Women initiative. That's how we started the company in the first place. And the second half is about industrial revolution, because the fourth industrial revolution is really about tech, but the fifth is more and more about humanity, and how is humanity going to benefit from the tech, not how is the tech going to control humanity. So tell us a little bit about experiences you've had in building movements, communities, partnerships, how it created a stronger economic impact, and again, by also doing good, by also having social or environmental impact.
I think you said the right words, right? Like building community, building a movement, those don't exist these days without tech. Like we have, when I think about civil rights and, women's movement prior to the tech revolution, it is actually mind blowing how you can arrange an entire like countywide bus boycott anywhere, right? Like, how did everybody find out? Who told them if you can't email and text and post all of these things? And yet it happened. But only in like, you can pinpoint every single one of those moments. Now there are like movements and revolutions happening every day because they can happen with the power of tech. But I do agree completely that like it has to be led by humanity. It can't be led by tech. And there is a little bit of a sort of friction there because tech itself as companies, even though some of them do really good things in the world, they are still driven by capitalism and making money and all of these things. And so the human part doesn't always get considered. And I think that's where building movements and communities of people, we have to be responsible for that, right? Like we have to take on the responsibility of keeping these moments and movements based in tech and growing in tech and communicated in tech, but they still have to be rooted in humanity. They have to be rooted in humans. But if you combine those two, like if you really truly can combine those, and if we had tech leaders who would truly combine both of those, you can still make a lot of money, like a lot of money. These people are not going to spend their money in generations and lifetimes, right? But if you could combine those and have that be the root of all tech, I mean, what that could do to everything, to business, to the environment, to just the care and well-being of people, you know, which gets lost in tech because it's business first and people second. And so there's just so much possibility. I would love to live in a world where those two were completely rooted in each other.
Yeah, no, you said that really well. You know, we do a lot of work in what we call untapped talent.
Mhm.
That's everything from veterans and refugees to formerly incarcerated, to people who don't have college degrees, to people who do but are going nowhere, whether it's creating a cyber security talent pipeline or a food talent pipeline, whatnot. But the biggest point is people can get great jobs and opportunities without being at the best college, without this, without that,
1000%.
and how that impacts, to your point, and creates a movement about untapped talent that goes all the way through family into communities, you know, impacts crime, impacts health, impacts everything. Um, that's a great movement to have, and there's plenty of untapped talent out there.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what we're doing with, so now I'm with the AHLA Foundation, which is the hotel industry, and the foundation piece of it focuses on collective impact in workforce, right? So how are we, every time a new company or city or state drops the educational requirement in job descriptions, I celebrate. I think that's a huge win because people these days are educated in so many ways that weren't happening before, right? Like, yes, do I want my doctor to have a medical degree? 1000%. There are certain parts of society where that needs to stay. I want the people like who are designing railways to have an engineering degree. Yes. But the vast majority of other positions, you don't need that in an era where we can access real-time information and education always, everywhere, in everything that we do. So I love to see that it's happening in the hotel industry, which is really cool because there's also a massive labor shortage. So we need people to really be revolutionizing the workplace that way.
So tell me a little bit more about being president of the American Hotel and Lodging Foundation. What's your vision, mission? What are you doing?
What are we doing? So yeah, it is what I love about the social impact space in general is collective impact. There's always like, there is power in numbers. You can build your own community and yet you are still just one tiny piece of the puzzle. So the hotel industry, as I am learning, I'm only a few months in, but it is on the back end very different than what we think of as just consumers of hotels, right? So you think like a hotel, oh, this is a Marriott owns this hotel. Well, Marriott actually owns less than 10 hotels. So once you start to like learn how owners and management companies and brands and, you know, this sort of crazy, we call it the three-legged stool, actually works and how many people are involved, it's a really cool industry, but it is an industry that is actually rooted in people. And so there is the foundation is just an opportunity for there to be collective impact, whether we are working to combat human trafficking in hotels or working to upskill the workforce and create more equitable paths to leadership for any employee entering hotels. I mean, the career pathways are just so cool. I cannot tell you the number of owners, general managers, and folks on like the corporate brand side who started as housekeepers, bellhops, you know, front desk service and all of those things. So like it is an industry that embraces you. And I have certainly felt that. But those are really like where we are working on access, we're working on equity, kind of creating those paths to leadership and certainly combating things like human trafficking, which has a lot of different holds on our society and affects a lot of industries, but this is certainly one of them.
Yeah, I'm actually on the board of Hidden Tears Project, which is they do
Mhm.
films raising awareness of human trafficking, sex trafficking in the States. The numbers are significant, how many there
Yeah.
are. And really quick, I was part of a bunch of speakers on it. And I said, have you ever been in the supermarket with your kids and you look up and they're not there? What goes through your mind?
Mm.
A million things go through your mind. It might be 3 minutes and you find them in the next aisle. But in the
Yeah.
meantime, you're thinking about that. Imagine what it's like
Everything. Yeah.
that it's a week, a month, months, and they don't have their kid yet thinking what's happening to them. So
Yeah.
congratulations on all that and everything that you're doing there, because
Yeah.
it's important for sure. So you're a Canadian woman. I had to say that. Fifth Element was actually launched on International Women's Day about 5 years ago at the UN headquarters. Um, So everything we do is related to diversity, inclusion, women for sure, etc. Because why not? I mean,
Yeah.
it's better to do that. Can you just share a little bit about your journey? I don't know, obviously free spirited, the hippie communion, which I think is awesome, which is probably where you get a lot of the creativity. But just talk
Yep.
about your journey as a woman in business, different sectors. How have you navigated and thrived in that?
Yeah. Well, I don't always feel like I'm thriving. First of all, I think there's, workplaces where still, no matter how many advances that we have, and we talk about flexibility and self-care and well-being and all of these things that are great discussions, we still very much live in a world, and especially in this country, where workplaces were designed for men by men, and they have changed at a very slow pace. Which is why we see that sort of first rung where women are dropping off, and the inequities in promotions and all of those things, because you have equal numbers, if not more, college educated women coming into the workforce than men. So like there are ways that's shifted, but the workforce itself doesn't reflect that, which shows that there's still a huge problem there. The boys club is still very much real, and it plays out in a lot of different ways. And we as women actively participate in these systems because we don't know any better either. We're all kind of coming into the same systems. And so a lot of women are just trying to like fix themselves to lead like men. And I think that for me, being authentic, like I could be on stage in front of 600 people right now or talking to you, and I would be talking the exact same way. This sort of, we have to show women what women who lead like women look like, and that it is possible. But we also need to show men what women who lead like women look like,
Yeah.
because when men really engage with women leaders, and when I say like men can lead like women have been trying to lead like men forever. And it's sort of, and it's not this like purely gender thing. Like there are aspects of feminine leadership and masculine leadership, right? And a lot of women have adopted aspects of masculine leadership, but feminine leadership, empathy, compassion, like all of those things that are key to a truly revolutionary workplace, you would have better productivity. I mean, it's proven, the data's all there, right? About how companies led by women or by men who lead like women do better. So it's proven, but it's hard to get people to let go. Change is hard. And when the decision makers, so I won't get on that soapbox. To your question, I think it is really important for women to be visible. And for me, that has been, I don't like being the center of attention. I'm an introvert who lives a very extroverted professional career, and it's exhausting. But it is important, the number of people that come up to me and just say, thank you. Like, thank you for being on stage. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being visible. That is what everybody needs to see. And I've been very fortunate that that's been a huge part of my journey, at least for the last however many years, of being able to sort of to be one of the many women who are out there leading from a place of authenticity. And I'm grateful that I've been able to do that, because not a lot of women are in that position. They won't get an opportunity to lead if they don't lead like men. So we need more people that feel safe in that space.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I had a Deloitte partner years ago. We'll talk about influencers in a minute. That told me, brilliance is simple. He told me, and I was 22, 23, whatever it was when he told me that. Like you kind of understand it, but then I understood it more and more. I mean, there's no reason why we shouldn't understand that diversity and different opinions and perspectives are actually kind of a good thing, and isn't it great that men and women are different?
Yeah.
Thing. If we were all the same, how boring would that be as well?
Right.
So, and then, often, I think a lot of mothers tell people this, if you tell everybody the truth, you don't have to worry about what you told everybody. Well, that's authenticity effectively. And it makes it
Absolutely.
easy to
Yeah.
speak wherever you're speaking if you're just telling just being who you are. It's a lot harder. I did a blog once years ago. It said, you don't need to be on all the time, just
Right.
be type of
Right.
thing. Because being
Right.
on is exhausting all the time.
Yes,
So,
it is.
well, what we say in LA that you kind of keep them wanting more, so you can do a sequel. So maybe that'll have to happen in one way or another. But one last question on this:
Yeah.
in 2021, a client told me about 2020. He said 2020 was the year that flew by slowly. I thought it was a great line. So with all that's happened, COVID, and then 2021 went by. doing its thing. 2022 just zoomed by. Now we're almost end of 2023. So with all
Yeah.
that said, what are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for?
Yeah, I am most grateful for my capacity to live from a place of joy. I mean, truly, I am very fortunate that I get to create change, that I am a passionate person, that I want to make the world better, and I get to every day, and that gets to be my career. And that can be hard, and it can feel like an uphill battle. And so it's not all sunshines and roses. So I think what I've learned is to then just choose happy. There's a lot I can't control. I have children, so automatically there's a lot I can't control on a daily basis. And the people that I work with and the people who are actively working against me, that's real. And so the fact that I have learned, I heard my whole life, happiness is a choice. And it didn't always feel that way. I was a very angry teenager. I just was like, felt very just sort of me against the world and in my feelings and low self-esteem and all these things that a lot of young women go through and young people in general, not just women. And so when I actually really took that to heart of like choosing joy that's my choice. And that doesn't mean that I'm happy all the time or I don't get frustrated or I don't have those moments, but choosing to approach that from a place of joy is the thing that I am most grateful for. It has been my biggest lesson in this life. And it's something that I hope that my children learn as well.
And hopeful for? Or is that hopeful what your children learn?
Oh, yeah, hopeful. Oh, I'm hopeful for so many things. I don't know. As much as hard as it is these days to be hopeful that communities really can come together, we are so separate, and not just politically, in so many different ways. People are kind of fighting all of these battles and bubbles, even for some of the same things, because they're competing for donors or they're competing for brand recognition or, all of these things. But I am hopeful that, my experience now being on this sort of collective impact side and bringing an entire industry together to do good makes me hopeful that that is possible across other industries, across other leaders, across, certainly the social service sector, that we can let go of competition enough to really join together to move things forward. Otherwise, we're all just spinning our wheels.
No, that's awesome. Well, I'm grateful to have a new Canadian friend.
Yes, me too.
And no, I'm just grateful that we've met, and you inspire me, and I think you're going to inspire other people that watch this. So congrats on all that, and it gives us a lot of hope that there's leaders who care like you, which is the point of this whole series in the first place, to show people that you can do way better. Period. When you're doing good at the same time. So thanks for that, and thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun. We have to continue to catch up, even if it's not being recorded. These conversations are important. So thank you. Thank you for just giving space to this. It is really important to hear about leadership from this angle. So thank you.
You're welcome.